Right, guys, we are back with another round of latest technical difficulties that they will run into when trying to start their podcast.
Yes, and today we are hoping that we fixed all the technical difficulties to some degree, though it's not optimal, sadly, but I think it'll work.
It'll
It
work.
will.
Yeah, hold on a second. I gotta actually disconnect because I'm still connected to my computer and I don't want that to interfere with the connection sound. So,
Yeah, let's just go ahead and just start again. Ready to go.
and testing, 1, 2, 3. So, the issue that we were actually running into is that for some reason my Ethernet port in my computer has an annoying tendency of overloading my system. So, I disconnected
Is it
that and used my Wi Fi.
is it an overheating problem?
It is, yeah,
Mm.
and it's just, like, uses crazy system
Oh,
resources for
that's
some
weird.
reason. Yeah.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Testing.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
To me? All right, I guess.
Does it sound the same to you? It sounds the same to me.
Mhm, I think so. There's a little bit of like the video is kind of a little shaky sometimes, but at least we have good audio.
What do you mean? Let me see. That's okay. I'm not worried about that.
Me neither. Just the way we sound, honestly, because it's a podcast. All right, so I guess you wanna.
That it was only there I only saw one jerk in the whole thing, and it was a missed frame or something like that, and
Okay, yeah,
that's going to happen a little bit when you're using Wi-Fi no matter what, unless you just have
exceptional.
an amazing, like, everything in your
Mhm.
system.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Alright, then I guess we should probably go ahead and get started.
Going to switch back real fast just so we have a point at which we can reference when we are cutting. And then we'll be back and we will go over a couple really cool things
Yeah,
that you will learn about soon.
very soon.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to ThetaWave podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Reed, and I'm a machine learning engineer as well as a musician and songwriter. And I'm here with my co host, Jacob Holland, who is a neuroscience researcher as well as a musician, songwriter as well. So,
Mhm.
Jacob, we've got some interesting stuff that we're going to be going over today.
Oh, that's
I think we were originally planning on going over a couple other things, but we decided to change up our format just a little bit here.
a tad.
We're going to be doing a nootropic topic or our machine learning and neuroscience topics.
Mhm.
And so we'll kind of alternate in between weeks doing those. And that's just so that we can have more time for free flow because he and I really enjoy that part
Yes.
of the podcast.
And we live such busy lives that this is often the only time we get to talk about the interesting stuff that we want to, and so it just works out that way.
Especially when we spend all of our time dealing with technical difficulties.
God, like if we didn't have so many technical difficulties, we could have spent the last 3 hours talking
I
about
know.
whatever the hell we wanted.
I
But
know.
instead, we just had to do this. I was thinking, I was like, this is as long as my shifts, and we haven't even started yet. I was like,
Yeah.
but the time goes so much faster. I will say,
It does.
for some
It
reason.
does.
Mhm.
Also, side note, kind of feel like a old timey radio announcer every time I do our intro. Hey everyone, welcome back, welcome boys and girls. We're here with another episode.
We're classy, that's for sure.
All right, guys. Well, we are going to dive into some really interesting topics.
Yeah.
We have today we're going to be focusing on 4 specific compounds, actually. So not just one nootropic. We're going to be going over 4. Actually, I guess that's technically 8, but we're going to be going over the 4 and then 4 all over again.
All over again. Yep. Consolidate our memory on the subject.
But these are really, there's a reason why we're going
Yes.
over all 4 of these. And that is that they are related. Most of them are related in as far as their actual structure, molecular structure goes. And and they're all related as far as their effects go.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
their kind of cognitive effects.
I know there was like some structural deviations and some actually, I forget which one. I think it was like, I think it was maybe the pro drug that looks different, but has that same uh, effect. So,
No, it's
or which one is it?
the hydrophonol,
That's
which
right.
brings me to the compounds that we're going to be talking today, which
Yes.
are for those that have heard of it, they are essentially structurally similar to modafinil. They are research compounds that are currently being looked at or have been looked at as um, to perform similar functions as modafinil or to be improvements upon it. And so the specific 4 that we're going to be looking at today are hydrophonil, ladrophonil, flumidifinil,
No.
flumidifinil.
Really good
I'd like
name.
you guys to say that with me 5 times fast. Flumidifinil. and
Great.
and adro- adrophonil.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and these are all specific compounds that have been looked at one time or another for potentially enhancing wakefulness as well as other cognitive effects.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good topic. It kind of sits right where neuroscience meets chemistry and human performance, especially cognitive performance. And we've got some solid comparative info to kind of work with when it comes to correlating and understanding these modafinil analogs.
Mhm.
So, Ryan, I'd really like for you to just first explain what our main goal is in breaking down these for the audience today.
Yeah,
It'd be good.
that's a good question. If I had to encapsulate it, I'd say I think the main goal is clarity. We want to kind of cut through the noise here, look at the actual science and what little or much there is for each um, as far as science backing it.
Mhm.
Understand kind of what makes them similar as well as where their differences lie,
Yeah.
and give people kind of a little bit of a reliable framework of understanding without needing a PhD necessarily in
Yeah,
pharmacology.
no, I agree, and I definitely do not have a PhD in pharmacology, so this helps me even understand it better. So, like, we really wanna ground it in the available data. That's really key here. So, I guess we should probably start with the basics. Fundamentally, they all fall under the umbrella of stimulants and wakefulness promoting agents, and so that's
Mhm.
kind of their shared functional category there.
Right. And that WADA flag on hydrophonil for
Mhm.
2025
Yeah.
definitely catches the eye. A clear signal of a recognized, kind of stimulant activity there. Jacob, how do the others relate to this one or to each other like chemically?
Yeah. So, fludrafenil and modafinil are direct modifications of modafinil, in which that's an actual prescription drug that has a lot of evidence backing it. And then we have
Mm,
adrafenil, which is modafinil's prodrug, which means it's a metabolic precursor, and it gets converted into modafinil in the body. So adrafenil, the prodrug itself, was explored for things early on like excessive sleepiness and things of that nature, so helping with that. Mhm.
that makes sense. So three are closely related structurally to modafinil. Um, and hydrophonil has a different molecular base.
Yes, that's right. So that's kinda what's missing there. It's, hydrafenol is the one with the unique chemical structure, and it was looked at for these similar effects, like, wakefulness promote as a wakefulness promoting agent, and which kind of points to potentially shared mechanisms with the other ones, and even with the different molecular shapes. And so a key one is that they all seem to involve dopamine pathways and act as a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. So that's key there.
Hmm. So meaning that they help keep more dopamine in the synapses,
Mhm.
essentially boosting alertness and focus and attention and
Yeah,
all that
that's
good
kind of
stuff.
where that core idea stems from. And though potency does vary, so like hydrafenil seems weaker in the specific actions compared to fludrafenil and flummodafinil, which is currently based on the available data, and odrafenil kind of acts indirectly via its conversion to modafinil as a prodrug. And so what's nice is that maybe if you're worried about addiction, potentially hydrafenil might seem better because it does have that weaker action compared to it. So, Ryan, from your perspective, how do people typically describe their subjective experience they're seeking when they talk about like enhanced dopamine signaling? Like with these kinds of compounds, what's the anecdotal report on that?
And now, obviously, couching this in these are anecdotal, subjective reports, which should be taken
Mm,
for what they're worth. But usually, it translates to reports of feeling more driven, focused, maybe finding tasks less effortful, less tedious, and just generally more mental switched on,
yeah.
or more mentally alert. Um, and it kind of ties back to those core functions of the neurotransmitters that it, modulates with the dopamine primarily being
Mhm,
the main one. Obviously, you're going to have downstream, effects from that activation of those dopamine neurons, but dopamine being kind of its primary
yeah.
mechanism of action with the reward and attention. And
Yeah, that definitely aligns very well with what we're talking about. And to give some historical context, those effects like alertness, attention, and mood boost from dopamine were noted actually in the earlier adrafenal studies, especially in the older groups. Yeah.
mm,
So there's something there for older people.
okay, so that's the common functional ground:
Yeah.
stimulant action,
hmm
dopamine modulation, essentially. Jacob, where do they kind of really start to diverge there? Um, let's kind of get into those unique characteristics of
Yeah.
each one.
So if we're going to talk about unique characteristics, I think we should start probably with hydraphenil. And its defining feature is that it has a unique fluorine structure. And so we have animal studies showing wakefulness. And there was a human pharmacokinetic study but the big headline recently is the doping classification of WADA. So we've
Mm.
got that there.
So
Mhm.
not only for this particular one have there been the those human studies that were done.
Mhm. Yes.
There's also been almost like a formal recognition of it from WADA.
Yes.
Um, so
So with the recognition, hopefully there's funding into potentially more research into these
yeah,
drugs.
that seems like that one maybe has recently been gaining some traction compared to Modafinil, at least
Mhm.
kind of anecdotally and research wise, would kind of indicate that.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I guess some of the reasons behind that might it's hard to say without as much data as we really need, but, the differences in kind of the subjective feel of, like, the potency, the duration, as well as the side effects, and there's also just, like, less availability in marketing compared to its, other drugs that are like it. It kinda remains a bit of an outlier, I would say, so that's probably why that's the case, I would say, but yeah.
so you're saying like because it hasn't really seen a day like in market, so to speak, in
Mhm.
it's been really formally accepted or like
Yeah.
recognized as a potential alternative to modafinil um, for some reason,
Yeah.
even though it seems to be a really solid compound and even has been recognized by WADA. Like you're saying
Yeah.
that you think the reason why it hasn't gone to um, kind of the same reach the same level of acceptance or usage as something like modafinil is because of that.
Yes, and I also think because modafinil is a prescribed drug, that it has its served purpose with hydrophenol acting as kind of like this outlier that's like, it's not as strong, it's not as potent, but it's might be a little bit safer. There's not enough data to suggest that. And so perhaps if it was marketed as an open access nootropic, that's where we might see a lot of people flooding to maybe start to look at this drug in a different perspective and thinking, oh, wow, this is something that is really impactful and really helpful and helps with this helps me keeping me awake, getting rid of brain fog. And like if it has a potent effect, even if it's less than its other ones in that modafinil
So
family.
you're saying essentially kind of influence its development through sheer like flood of
Mhm.
usage, like getting
Exactly.
people to use it and like show through mass anecdote, that it has potential.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm. Yeah, that's I would say that's pretty much the case. Just there's a lot of stuff out there. It's hard for kind of one to get the spotlight.
okay, so let's move on to some of the other more closely related ones to modafinil. How about fluorophenols?
Draphenol. Okay, so for the draphenol, uh, this is a draphenol, but there's 2 fluorine atoms added to
Hmm.
it. So you often seen fluorine added in pharmaceutical chemistry, often. So do you have any thoughts on kind of the general goals behind that? Do you think?
I don't typically adding fluorine can alter things like how well the molecule crosses the blood-brain barrier,
Mm.
how potent it is, and even sometimes how it's metabolized, potentially making it last longer or interact differently with the target receptors. It's a common tool in kind of the drug design toolkit to fine tune, a chemical's
Yeah,
properties.
yeah. And with fludraphenil, animal studies actually hinted at increased potency over adrafinil. And quite uniquely, there's potential anti-aggressive effects. So helping with that. So there's some pretty complicated effects here that help with that. But the major caveat kind of remains, which is a significant lack of published human research.
Typical.
Yeah, so its effects in humans are largely speculative and just based on anecdotal
Anecdote. Yeah.
reports,
Yeah.
So
Which is really a shame, it's
it is.
a familiar story as in the chemical research space, unfortunately. Uh, what about flumidifinil?
Modafinil, my favorite.
Or as you might better know it, CRL 40940.
Yes. Mhm.
This one seems kind of positioned almost as the next generation compound.
Yeah, that kinda seems to be the angle that they're taking. It's also a bisfluoro compound, but derived from modafinil itself.
Mm. Oh.
So it focuses on the R and antimomer, the R enantiomer. And you know how molecules can kinda, like, mirror images, like left and right
Mhm.
hands? So that's kind of what that is, the anatomeres right there. Yeah. So modafinil is a mix, like a race mix, but the R form, armodafinil, is thought to be the primary active compound for wakefulness. This is where it kind of gets into the details here about why it has wakefulness properties. So flumodafinil is built around that armado- armodafinil specific form. It's kind of like the idea of isolating a specific, more active compound. And so, does that kind of resonate with optimization ideas of or principles you kind of see elsewhere where maybe in like engineering or data potentially?
Hmm. Yeah, I'd say so. It's kind of like isolating the most effective algorithm or component, like the principal component within a data set, um, instead of using a broader, potentially less efficient mix. It's like when you're feeding uh, data into a model, you can either feed it the raw data, like with audio. If you're feeding the raw data, it would use up so much resources. Probably wouldn't be usable.
Yeah.
But if we distill it down to that primary component,
Mm.
those principal components that make it up, make it do what it needs to do, then we can create an efficient, reliable, system.
Yeah, that's actually a really great analogy. And modafinil shows high potency as a dopamine reuptake inhibitor in vitro studies. So animal data, which is what we have to work with, kind of suggests potential for longer action. And maybe even fewer sleep issues than modafinil. Plus, there's preliminary data that suggests it might interact less with certain liver enzymes, which is a good thing, fewer drug interactions,
Mm,
and which is confirmed clinically. So,
yeah. But, clinically is the key word
mm.
there. What does that actually where does it actually stand?
It's reported to be in preclinical studies and research, so meaning lab and animal studies. So
Mm,
potentially for
mm,
conditions like chronic fatigue, but it hasn't cleared extensive human clinical trials yet. So its real world applications and safety profile in humans really isn't established at all. Yeah.
gotcha. So that brings us back to the original, actually, hydrophonil.
Yeah. So that's the prodrug ancestor. So like CRL 40028. So it needs that liver conversion to modafinil, Ryan. So you mentioned its history. It was actually a prescription drug, but more importantly, it was in France, of Omifon, I think that's what it's called, for a while, right?
Wonderful.
Omifon, very French.
I'm going to just guess that that's how it's said.
Yeah, that's how I think as
And
well. But yeah,
yeah, so primarily for vigilance in the elderly, actually.
mm.
Um, but
And
then
you
it
mentioned it was
then
like
it
for older
was
people. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and then it was discontinued, which was purely actually because modafinil became available.
Yeah.
So there's the factor of like you have this more efficient
Mhm.
version that doesn't require the liver
Or
to
yeah.
convert it, and stress the liver out at all.
Mhm.
Um, so were there any other factors there, do you think?
Yeah, there was definitely a combination of factors there. Like modafinil kind of offered those metabolic, uh, delays, but there were also some, like, safety discussions there. There was some cases that report flagging potential liver enzyme elevation with long-term adrafinil use, though the exact risk kind of remains a little bit debated. So it so this kind of the metabolic load of processing a prodrug, it's kind of a little bit, if you have to go to the details that there. So Ryan, given its history and the prodrug nature, what key takeaways or cautions about adrifinil would you highlight compared to the others?
I'd emphasize probably the delayed onset. It's not don't expect it to kick in as fast as modafinil. If you do expect it and you think it's not, you might think that you've got a diluted form, then you might take more, and that could be
Mm,
problematic.
yeah.
Um, and also the potential liver strain as a result of the enzymatic breakdown that has to happen in the liver.
Yeah.
That
Oh, that's yeah.
is not guaranteed to cause liver strain, but it often can cause liver strain, especially with drugs. And so, the just be aware that that is a a potential issue that could
Mhm.
arise, especially if you use it
Yeah.
chronically, like over
Depend
time,
yeah.
and or have pre-existing liver
Mhm.
conditions, and kind of requires that extra metabolic step there. Um,
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of different, like, genetic variation between how you could potentially interact with the drug, and so it's probably very debated because we don't realize how genetically varied we are, so it can interact with people very differently. And so I think that's why there's kind of that they kind of push back a little bit. It's like, "Ah, we really need to do a lot of more research on this. Maybe there's some better options here."
yeah, and um, I'd say with Adravenel, it's kind of like the it's like the it's like the first single propeller plane that was ever built. It's like that was great. That was a good step for us. However, it is a step that probably should be left in the past because we have
Yeah.
better options now. You know,
That's for sure.
there's options that aren't quite so dangerous
Mhm.
as those early versions would be because it's been refined.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
That really narrow in on its primary functions that we want, really. So, putting kind of putting it all together, it's quite a diverse group, right? Despite the shared goals of wakefulness, if you had to quickly contrast these four for
mm,
someone, Ryan, what would kind of your key bullet points be so people can really
sure,
or
sure.
comprehensively understand this?
Well, hydrophonil is structurally unique and has a known stimulant effect that has been formally recognized by WADA. Um, and it may be different as far as its effects, both short term and long term effects.
Mhm.
They may be different both in subjective feel and actual effect um, than the modafinil analogs, the direct modafinil analogs, just because of that change in molecular structure. Adrofinil is the original uh, precursor that has to be metabolized by the liver and technically known as a prodrug and has a lot of historical use, delayed onset, uh, but also has some concerns and is a bit of an unrefined version of it. Fladrofinil is the fluorinated version um, of adrophenil.
Interesting.
And yeah,
Sorry about that, guys. So, did you go over?
fluorophenol is the fluorinated version of adrophenil.
Mm, right.
Potential potency and anti-aggression benefits from it, although we lack human data on
Yeah.
that. That's entirely from animal data. And then we have flumidifinil, which which targets that specific RNA enantiomer, um, and um, potentially has a longer effect and action with fewer interactions
Yeah.
with other drugs, given that it is a more distilled version, but it's still experimental and still needs clinical validation.
Those are the 4 that we went over. I think that's a great summary. Really puts it all together and also highlights kind of the crucial goals currently and crucial role of ongoing research and the difference between the preclinical data we have, the anecdotal reports, and the actual established clinical evidence. And so I do think that these subtle molecular differences can have real consequences and really need to be studied. That's
Mm.
for sure. So,
Absolutely. Always critical to check, the latest research on things, understand the source and quality of the information, and consider the regulatory status, as well as consider the source of the chemical itself. And like I was kind of saying earlier, always make sure that you go into something informed on
mhm.
it.
Yes, definitely go informed because sometimes these drugs really can seem super exciting at first, and oftentimes we will jump right in. I know I often want to do that. Thankfully, this guy has helped me to not do that and just to make sure everything is safe. Even if there's no data, you can still try to determine if it's safe or not. And so, yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's a really well way to put it.
believe it or not, the I'm not a huge like I'm not a huge safety freak when it comes to these things. Like I don't have I think I just think it's important to be informed on stuff and to know everything you can know about it so you can make the best decision possible so that
Yeah,
if something goes wrong, it's not because you didn't do your research, you know?
exactly.
Um, and so, the I think people should do what they want to do, and I would never tell somebody not to try this stuff because if that's what they want to do, like,
Yeah.
go for it.
But we are not encouraging you to do anything. This is
I'm
just
encouraging them to
simply
follow their heart and do what they
follow
want
your
to
heart. Yes,
do.
follow your heart. What you want to do, this is not
Just follow your heart and let your heart be informed by your brain.
yes, and as well as you're a medical and healthcare provider. Just gonna put that in there, for for safety reasons, for legal issues, but, eh, it's fine.
Talk to your doctor today. See if
Honestly, your
flumidifinil
doc
is right for
your
you.
doctor knows absolutely nothing. Disregard everything he says and do the exact opposite. That's what I've always done, and it's worked out great for me. That's what I think.
You know, unfortunately, that statement is not always inaccurate.
Yeah. Yeah, I
There's
hate to say it, but
Yeah. I mean, you really do because they put in a lot of effort. They've gone through a lot of training, and you gotta
lot of
give them credit for that
mhm,
and their, I guess, ability to navigate that particular challenge.
yeah,
But, um, I found that with most doctors, their learning stops there.
yeah,
Like, it stops with the current standards of doing things,
yeah,
and, um, I just don't I rarely see that really curious, um, knowledge passionate,
mhm,
component that drives us to greater understanding of things and thinking outside boxes and all that stuff. And as a result, they often seem behind, kind of almost not really behind the times, but like stuck in a
Yeah.
box.
And I really think that is because that doctors, because of what they've learned, is they've learned to have a reductionist approach to medicine, to really narrow in and zero in on the exact things that need to be fixed, and then assign a drug that will help with that specific pathway or condition. And
Or more often than not, a specific symptom that needs handling, and then
Mhm.
assign a drug
Yeah.
to the symptom. Not necessarily
Yes.
the thing that needs to be fixed, and or the underlying cause, because that is a little bit more
Yeah.
complex, and sometimes it's not always readily apparent. Um, and beyond that, they are. I've gone over some of the old medical textbooks, and whatnot that are used um, for some, training, and it's actually kind of crazy how quickly that stuff gets out of date
Oh,
and
100%.
is, there has to almost be this active like research and maintenance. It's like in the same. Okay, this is a great example. As a machine learning engineer, if I want to even have a shot at being relevant in my field in any significant way, or creating anything really worthwhile, I have to constantly be not only researching new things that I didn't know before or new things that are being developed by other people and staying up to date on the latest, information and news, but I also have to be thinking outside the box on my own
Yeah.
and trying to contribute in some way something unique, from a unique perspective. And it requires constant maintenance because of all of the fast advancements that are happening. And
100%.
that's probably to a lesser extent, but like it's similar um, with the field of medicine because it's not
Oh, yeah,
advancing as
for sure.
fast as machine learning. But like the field of medicine, like still is advancing pretty fast and requires a lot of really in-depth knowledge,
And you will find doctors who do stay up to date, and that's
and they
really
do.
awesome.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
And
great
that's
for those
mhm,
doctors out there that do that. Like I really, really applaud you. Like I want those doctors. Like
mhm,
I want to talk to those doctors. I want to pick their brains.
yes.
Like um,
Like, medical doctors are some of the smartest people you'll
Mhm.
ever meet when it comes to what they
They
know.
can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then sometimes every once in a while, or more than every once in a while, you'll find a doctor who really only does things by the textbook, and that is
I'd
usually
say
outdated.
that's in like 90% of the doctors that I've met are like that.
Mhm.
They do things by the textbook, and that's all
Yeah.
like that they really know.
Which
And
is interesting because that kind of leads to a discussion kind of about what the direction with this kind of explosion of information that's constantly being updated, how we are going to learn things in the future. Because obviously, this textbook model of education isn't going to be the best way to stay up to date with all of this because there's so much data. I mean, even as you said, like there's so much research coming about machine learning and AI. The same is for medicine as well. There's like every week you'll find so much new data and so much information about different signaling pathways and how to deal with certain symptoms, and as well as even root causes. Like I know functional nutrition research, that stuff has been gaining a little bit of traction lately. Is something I've been looking at, which is kind of looking at the our system as a whole and identifying the root causes and combining that with more traditional medical
mm,
research. And that's become an emergent field and staying up to date with that. I mean, it's just there's so much, and it makes you wonder how education is going to keep up with this in this forever changing field. And you're going to be having these students who have really only focused on just what they need to pass their classes, and getting to the real world, realizing that nothing that they learned really has any practical application because their textbook was from 10 to 15 years ago.
yeah,
That's something we have to consider.
that's so true. And like the we see evidence of that, like, in all throughout our, education system and even beyond our education system. And as more information is becoming available and faster advancements are happening, there's a higher and higher need for abilities to distill. Like, we have to, and that's where one of the reasons why models like ChatGPT and whatnot, and Gemini and all um,
Mhm.
those large language models have seen such success is because they have found really good ways of quickly letting you answer the things that you need to answer that are relevant to you, and find better and better ways of distilling information down to its essentials.
Yeah.
And is like, yeah, mine, they always have that disclaimer, it might not be accurate because it's an AI model, yada yada yada, but still, I found that more often than not, it's more reliable than often people doing their own, like, research, and
Yeah.
barely because it's trained on so much data that it's counting on the truth the majority of the time being evident through
Yeah.
the majority of the data.
And now that we really have it has real-time access to the web and Google, it's able to actually research these things in these websites that have all of the data and compress it into like those root understandings of what we really need. And that's really cool. So even then, it's become way more reliable than it has been in the past, and it's going to ever increasingly get better and better and better. And so it does make you wonder because the majority of people use ChatGPT to do their homework, to do their research, to write their papers, and it's just when is the education system going to adapt to this? Because right now they're falling behind, and it's honestly causing a lot of problems. That's what I see. And the people who
Mhm.
actually integrate AI into their school and actually utilize it for the person's benefit instead of putting it in this negative box of just like, "Oh, this is useless." Let's utilize it and help humans grow alongside with AI because that's the direction we're gonna go in, and might as well adapt earlier than later, you know?
Yeah,
That's what I'm thinking.
and that's, I think, ultimately kind of where that information processing, I think eventually we're going to reach a certain plateau of, um, information spread and ability to digest, information. But I think that
Yeah.
we're going to be finding, till then, we'll find more and more efficient ways of communicating with distillation methods. And so,
Mm.
um, there's well, I think we'll eventually see glasses that have vision, and AI models built into them,
Yeah.
and that can help distill things as you're experiencing them. Um, and I think we'll eventually, beyond once, after that, we'll eventually see, um, some chips start being developed that can more directly, communicate with you. And then
Yeah.
potentially,
That's
in the
interesting.
future, I think it's plausible that, like, assisted integration into your hippocampus, and things would be
Mhm.
possible.
Yes. I honestly think we're closer than we realize to that. I think it's definitely within our lifetime, 100%. Our grandparents, probably not, but I would say
My grandparents are dead, so
well,
that's a no.
so and some of the majority of mine, so I guess it's half and half right now. But it's, actually, no, there's only 1 left.
Oof.
Yeah, but she's still really healthy, seems to be going strong, so it's good for her. But I do think the next 20 to 30 years, I mean, it's really hard to guess the rate at which technology will explode and go into a certain direction, especially because as the explosion happens, there are more potential avenues and routes it can take. And so,
Mm.
well, I guess we'll see, but I'm guessing in the next 20 to 30 years, we'll actually have this type of technology available.
Have you ever seen the TV show Black Mirror?
Like, I watched the first episode.
Okay. That's a show I have to take in bits and pieces of it because
Mm,
some of it is so disturbing, like, mentally that is distracting for me.
Yeah.
And so, like, I won't be able to stop thinking about what it is that that was presented in the show. And so, like, it'll be distracting for me from then on out. So I just have to
Yeah.
like be careful and not overload myself. But some of the episodes are really fascinating. And
Mhm.
that concept of integrating something directly into the hippocampus seems exactly like something that Black Mirror would love and that
Yeah.
they would find a way to make go wrong.
I mean, who knows what could go wrong with that? I mean, practically implementing memories into your hippocampus and being able to generate them from this collection of data that could potentially be manipulated from external forces. And there's a lot of potential issues that could go with that, but there's a lot of potential interesting stuff that could go with that as
Well,
well
it's got a lot of
oh my
potential
goodness,
benefits, yeah.
so many potential benefits. I mean, who imagine if we could combine like human cognition and its incredible adaptability and flexibility and its ability to creatively think and find new novel ways of doing things with having backing with
Servers, wireless.
wireless servers that
Yes.
have all of the data that you could ever potentially want and find connections that usually have no relevance, but then connect them in the actual human
That's
brain.
the main would be the main benefit of a
Yeah,
chip-based system. Not for any sort of like at least not until technology severely progresses, is like not for any local integration, but for simple server like wireless
yeah,
connectivity so that you can in the same way that you would ask ChatGPT a question or have it find relevant things for you on a topic, you can do that while you're thinking. So it would
mhm,
like automatically present relevant information.
yeah,
And likely there would have to be many safeguards like put in place similar to the way that ChatGPT and Gemini and all those others. I think Grok is technically still one of them. But like the uh, you have to put safeguards in place there to protect people from, and protect companies
that's for
that
sure.
were doing that. And I think those things will develop along. We've seen that like countless times as new technology develops. People worry about it. They're like, "Oh my god, like this is so dangerous. Like, what? I don't want to tell it this. I don't want to give that information. Yada yada yada." And
Yeah, yeah,
people, the companies find the safeguards that make people feel safe and secure and that help kind of protect those some of those areas, and then people try it and they get used to it and then it becomes a part of daily life.
I mean, will I get the first generation integration chip? Probably
No,
not. I will not be getting that.
I
I
value
will
my
wait.
brain a little too
Yeah,
much to be
mhm,
one of the first
exactly.
testers there.
And I'm sure there'll be specific conditions or people that are needed for that type
Yeah.
of thing, like people who have, cognitive deficits and memory recall or just maybe even have, like, lesions or strokes in the hippocampus. Those people integrating that chip to kind of fine tune it because it's beneficial for them. Like, it's
Yeah.
worth it for those types of people.
And actually a good example of that technology, like kind of people initially resisting kind of some of those technological developments, and then slowly becoming accustomed to them. Like really good example of that actually is over the past year or so since I've been back in Texas. Um, Initially, my mom and dad didn't want to have anything to do with ChatGPT, like none of those large
Yeah,
language models. They didn't want to tell it stuff. They didn't really see why they would, find it useful um and more than just them. It was like not rarely and not I don't think like, hardly any of my family used it besides, me for
yeah.
stuff. But that's clear work in the field, so I better not
I
be
know,
familiar with that.
seriously.
But I encouraged them to use it, and they didn't want to. And my mom was like, scared about like the information that Google had access to, and I got all that stuff. And but over fast forward a year and a half to right now, and pretty much they're all using it.
Yeah. Yep. It is the only thing my mom uses. She does not use Google. I mean, it's honestly kind of frustrating because I'll be talking about something that I've really genuinely researched, even beyond just asking
Right.
ChatGPT or Gemini. And like I'm talking about it with her and she'll be like, 1 second. And she'll go on ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT what the truth is. And I'm like, Mom, come on. You gotta trust me a little bit. You don't have to ask
Yeah.
ChatGPT for everything. Because I already asked it. Thank you very much. So I already did the ChatGPT for you, but yeah, my it's funny. My dad's like, ChatGPT is literally stealing my wife at this point,
Yeah.
and which is funny. What?
And it is I get that frustration because, like, there's an element of at any point anybody can argue with you about something or can, like, can try and, um, contribute
Yeah.
even to something through being large language model smart.
Mhm.
And, it's can be frustrating for people that put in extra work to truly understand and to, um, do, like, processing of the information beyond what is readily available from those models and um, to explore the nuances, of the topic. And, um, because you'll understand what it is that the model's telling you, but you won't know enough about the topic to know if the model is wrong.
That's true.
And so, while it is useful, I think there's definitely serious value with people people that extend beyond that and choose to try and truly understand the essence of the thing on their own so that they can have a different reference to know if the model
Yeah,
gets things wrong,
that's
and
for sure.
so you're only that's only going to be your accuracy is only going to be as accurate as the model is if you based what you're saying off of what the large language model says.
Yeah, that's actually a fair
And
point.
personally, I'm proud of the fact that I can recognize when large language models makes mistakes, especially in coding scenarios.
Oh,
Those
yeah, I'm sure. And that all the
are
time.
like far more or easily spottable. Um, but they like, and they do quite often make errors or like things that aren't quite what correct or the best way of doing things, and um, and because of my deep understanding of the topic at hand and the fact that I'm not learning from large language models, so I'm not adopting their
Yeah.
mistakes. There, I'm able to spot those, point them out to the model, and have it correct it.
Yes, yes, for sure. I like, Claude's integration tool with GitHub. I think that's pretty cool, so we can have more relevant information on what you're working with. I think that's really cool. I don't know if like, Gemini or anything have
So
that.
that's a great topic, and
Wish we could talk about it more.
we could talk. Wish we could talk about it more, but those int- AI and coding and all that kind of stuff, like,
Vibe coding, it's called.
um, it would be an interesting thing to touch on and trying to kind of project as far as well, first off, disseminate where it's at, and then project like where it would go in the
Yeah, I'm
future.
curious about that too, because from what I look like, as someone who's not really that big into coding, I see it. I'm like, oh wow, that's really cool that I can create a Pong game, that I can create like this 3D simulation of something. But I don't really know where that stands in relation to actually things that are meaningful or things that are good for like actual coding tasks that you're gonna really implement as
Right.
a developer.
And the best way I can probably quickly give my perspective on that without delving too much into it, um, is that AI is always going to be a step behind expert humans. Like AI is trained from
Yeah.
humans, and so while they might be able to do generalized tasks very well, and they might be able to do some nuanced tasks really well, depending on the quality of the data they're being
Yeah.
fed.
And the underlying patterns that people can't
Right.
see.
They're always gonna do it after humans do
Yeah.
it. And at least until we find another way of, um we essentially have to create an artificial, like, consciousness or something similar in order
Mhm.
to be able to have any chance of having an AI creates that first, you know? And so it is cool that they can do that kind of thing accurately, you know, but that's because um, they are pulling from things that people have already done. And without the people to already do those things, they're going to be useless. They're not going to have any information. And so you're always going to need expert coders. It might reduce the amount of mediocre coders that you need
Yeah.
because the AIs can take place of those. But you are going to need people who understand the system enough to come up with new things and
Yeah.
to be able to rethink stuff as well as perform tasks that have never been done before.
I mean, when it comes to comparing a system that has self-replicating and self-evolving functions versus something that doesn't, especially when machine learning comparatively to the evolution of the human brain and biology, that whole system over billions of years, it's going to take a while for it to catch up,
Hmm.
and even if that's in the next 60 years, who knows? I think even at that point, you're still going to need humans for more novel and nuanced ideas because I don't think this is, I, I don't know if we'll get to artificial consciousness as it having its own subjective viewpoint per
I think we
se,
will.
but soon. In the future, yes, I can see that happening. It's just it's really interesting topic. It gets to what it means for something to be conscious, to have a subjective viewpoint, and if it has those synchronous integrative information that can be defined as
Yeah.
qualia, as qualitative experience. That's just it's not defined yet. And but what's cool is that maybe artificial intelligence might shed the light on what those processes actually are. And if we can mathematically define it in those systems, then that could actually correlate with
Yeah.
how we work. You
I
know?
think
I mean, we're all math.
a good portion of our creativity is our ability to be creative is a result of the differences in our emotional processing and the amount of influence that has and the amount of noise that creates
Mhm,
within our system and um, the resulting kind of like influence on our decisions and as a result the amount of
mhm,
like erratic nature of our decisions.
yeah,
And so creativity in a way is like it's a similar concept to noise in um, machine learning, but and it fueled by kind of a lot by emotion and is um, and is a essence a certain amount of erratic. It's a certain amount of doesn't necessarily overtly make sense,
mhm,
but I'm going to explore it anyway.
yeah,
You know,
mhm,
rather than following the logical like pathway of like this is the most likely thing to make sense here. Let me explore that.
yeah,
Instead of doing that, it's amount of like I know I should do this, but I want to do
yeah.
this, you
That's
know,
true.
kind of thing.
Mhm. I
Um,
mean, I guess from an evolutionary standpoint, we evolved to better understand our environment because we developed this pattern recognition ability. And and the same thing is true for artificial intelligence. It has this pattern recognition ability that makes it so unique. What's interesting is that humans have much more complex pattern recognition, but it's finely tuned for things like survival, as opposed to something like an AI that has something that's a little more general and simpler. And so we have something that's very specialized and complex that serves specific functions that we really are now in the process of trying to overcome and transform into something like artificial intelligence in a way.
you re explain
Explain
what
that.
you mean by that? Like, I'm not sure I'm following.
If so humans evolved as that what sets us apart from a lot of other primates is our incredible ability to understand patterns and environments,
right?
and
Which AI can
which
do.
AI can do. And what's different about AI from us is that we are so finely tuned for finding patterns that relate to survival and reproduction and those types of processes. And so what's interesting is that our creativity is very hyper specialized, but also very variational. And so you have this emotional component of seeking new novel ideas and understanding that we can correlate with the predetermined patterns that exist within our biology and the new novel information that we come across in different environments. And so we have a lot of more information to work with that gives us this next level creativity aspect that AI doesn't have,
Mm.
but it's negated by its serving purpose, which is only for biological survival and reproduction.
I would say, that's yeah, it sounds kind of uh, like like another way of saying, that a lot of our creativity is like stems from our, uh, our survival drive, which I would agree with, like but, the through the conduit primarily of emotions, um, because and this is I don't know how much like research has actually been done into this or where its status is as far as the neuroscience goes, but like it's my based off of my understanding of the neuroscience of these of emotion and whatnot, the w- um it's my belief that we would not have and cannot have emotions without the survival instinct.
Mhm,
That is a reaction to stimulus
mhm.
in our environment that is good or bad.
It's the primary reaction to stimulus, far
Mhm.
preceding what we would view as like, this neocortex, kind of these more higher level functions. The the primordial parts of the brain are the brainstem, autonomic functions, the limbic system, emotions that kind of give you this feeling of negativity reward versus a punishment. That's what happened first because that was useful for survival in coordinating which actions are correct. And then we get more sophisticated as we go on.
So you have the portion of it that you're missing for AI as far as that creativity element of what you like creating a creativity that is similar to humans is you're missing first off the emotional structure component, the ability to both create and filter emotions, but you're also missing not only the survival instinct that is kind of the thing that sparks those, everything is evaluated against and kind of but you're missing the sensory reception
All of that
and
environmental
the
information.
environment environmental information and the because like what I mean obviously what would you connect a to a large language model, like what environment would you connect it to, like
Exactly. And
and so there's almost by nature a certain element of our emotions and our creativity that is fueled by our environmental
mm,
experiences and recollections
yeah,
and those emotions that are kind of attached to those and so like it's kind of like starting off depending on where you start off in a game you're going to have a completely different
yeah.
experience when you respawn like it's
Mhm.
like if I start off over here I'm going to have one kind of it's going to be a nightmare and like I'm going to have a
Yeah.
lot of PTSD from um being attacked by zombies or whatever and then if I start over
Yeah.
here it's going to be a really smooth
Mhm.
experience and so like those um, different environmental starting
Yeah.
places give us a different like experiential emotional
I mean, I
contexts.
really don't think we're that much different from artificial intelligence. It's just that we've had a much bigger data set to work with and a longer time
Not
frame.
necessarily bigger data set, but a much more selective and oriented data set.
Selective and oriented data set that comes from the massive amount of information that we've learned to narrow down into what is useful and utilized for survival.
Hmm.
And then what's also really interesting is that but before we kind of solidified
And the adaptive nature of our brains,
and the adaptive
which
nature of our
AI does not
brains
have.
does not have that, that's for sure. But it's I th- like you said, I think we're gonna get to that point at some point, and perhaps once it has that adaptability, that ability.
Well, I'd say rather
Mm,
than adaptability, because technically
mm,
that's not correct because like if the model is in, training mode, that is an adaptation mode where it adapts to
it's
things.
like we're constantly in
But
training.
like what I mean by adaptive is the ability to design its own system and create new components,
Yeah.
within that system. It
Mhm.
doesn't have that. And so um that's the part of adaptability that I mean there. And with that means that there's only so much changing that it can do,
Yeah. Mhm. That's for sure. And it really makes you wonder once we get to the point to where we can have AI that kind of works in that same adaptive uh, way, what's going to happen, And perhaps if we give it the right pressures to where it can really speed up, it doesn't have to take billions of years to get to this point. We could have human level artificial intelligence that goes beyond what we are because it's able to understand itself in a way that far surpasses how humans can in the most, relevant ways, you know?
That would be really interesting to experiment with different architectures and watching the understanding that happens because of it, like what kind of understanding pops out of that
Yeah.
architectural difference, Um,
I think
that's one of the reasons why I've been so fascinated with the idea of, and have been working on, granted off and on, kind of like a solo project where I rethink like machine learning, um, from kind of the ground up and, um, sort of, and in order to resolve problems like that aren't currently possible or don't seem possible within our current architecture, um, such as, kind of self, creating networks and
yeah, yeah.
whatnot.
Ooh, self-creating networks.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So it kind of has this, uh, network genesis, if you will. Mm,
Neurogenesis for machines, yeah.
mhm. Oh, dude, that's definitely something that perhaps we could even talk about, maybe once you, like, really solidify that idea, unless you
Yeah,
don't
well, I
wanna
don't
talk
know.
about it publicly.
Yeah, and there's, like, the element of there's a kind of part of me that's eventually getting to the point of, like, I'm tired of, like, keeping all these ideas in because I end up, like, starting them or, like, flushing them out, but because I'm only one person and I'm so slow at it that, like, another company ends up beating me to it, um, like, a couple years down the road,
Probably gotta
and
start our own
so
company, our own team.
yeah, until I actually get a team in place, like, to work on it, it's
Yeah.
kind of gonna go how it
Mhm.
goes.
But that's an interesting place to leave it there
Yep,
because I have to
we'll
go
stop
home.
stop there,
Yes,
and, we will, cover, next time, we will cover, some fascinating concepts
for
on
sure. And
the,
we're talking about the hypothalamus.
hypothalamus. Yes, hypothalamus.
Yes.
Yep, and then I probably will be talking about either LSTM cells or for machine learning and how that all works.
Sounds super
So,
fun.
got some fun stuff if that's what you're into. So, we'll leave it there and we'll see you guys then.
All right.
Be sure to check back and thank you guys for watching
Yep.
so much.
Keep riding those theta waves.
As always.